Welcome to Vivid Vibes Podcast, where we talk about information for your soul's vibration. I'm Jada,
And I'm Laura.
and today we'll be talking about conscious coping.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should start by clarifying what we even mean when we say conscious coping, huh?
Yeah. So, Jada, what do you feel conscious coping is?
Hmm. Conscious coping, I guess when we say that, we're really just talking about getting through your problems in a way that's healthy. So here, I'm going to look up the definition for coping. Let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, but I got like, it says the top typically sloping course of a brick wall. Okay, but the verb means, okay, to cope, deal effectively with something difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So, Laura, how can consciously coping affect your soul's vibration?
Well, when you are trying to cope with something, that to me, it it elicits the fact that, okay, there's something outside of your control, or it feels like it's outside of your control. So you're trying to come up with a way of dealing with that sense of being out of control, whether or not it's finding something to just do in a physical sense, like a little tick or a habit that you might form because you're just trying to deal with the sensation or the feeling of being out of control again. When you're in that state, that can bring down your soul's vibration in a way, but it really depends on the circumstances or the situations. That can be different from person to person, especially with what they're trying to deal with. I know on my personal level, um like if I feel like there's something amiss but I don't know what it is, I can't
Mm-hmm.
put my finger on it or I can't pinpoint it. That's something that I feel, okay, I feel slightly out of control of. It might be minor, it might be a minute thing, but at the same time, when I feel out of control on something, I typically go into like, oh, I need to just clean something. I'll feel better if my house is clean. I just have to do something that I feel I can control. And to me, it's taken time, but that's something that I've learned to be conscious of as I've gotten older. Like, oh, I'm cleaning. That means something's not quite right. Something's amiss and I haven't pinpointed what it is. So, what is it? And, it can be various things, but I just go off from there. And I feel like our listeners, people are going to, they might not be aware of it, but there's going to be other things that they can touch that they might resonate with in some way, like, oh, when I feel out of control, I typically do this out of habit or this out of habit. And it's really just being aware of what your habits are or how they come about.
Totally. So that's what a coping mechanism is, really, is like coping itself is just getting through the problem effectively, but a coping mechanism is like a system or a I mean, when I'm looking at the definition, it says a system of parts working together in a machine.
Well, we are
That's
just flesh machines, aren't we?
yeah, right. Right? So like that's the first definition, but that is the one that sticks out to me the most because it's like a coping mechanism is like a system that you're using to cope, to effectively deal with something, right?
Right.
So to me, whenever we say consciously coping, that's doing something that's not harming you physically, emotionally, mentally, or like repressing the problem. A conscious coping mechanism or conscious coping would be being able to find awareness of the problem and move through it rather than pushing it down. So
Right.
that kind of leads us into what are coping mechanisms. So you kind of got into that a little bit, saying for you, whenever you clean, it makes you feel like you have control. But coping mechanisms can be so many things. So, what are some
Mhm.
other coping mechanisms
Oh
that
gosh.
people use? Just anything that comes to mind.
Well, on the negative spectrum, there are like, okay, cigarette smoking. I mean, that's a habit that forms because there's usually And again, it's something they can do physically to feel in control, right? Other things like nail biting, and again,
Nail
these
biting is so common.
uh-huh, exactly. Like people like even just fiddling with your hair, toe tapping, like if you're like or twitching your foot like when you're sitting still or something like that, cracking your knuckles. Things like that are physical kind of habitual things that often become unconscious because people just get in the habit of doing it. They're not even realizing they're doing it. And then something, oh, can I tell a story real quick on that?
Yeah, of course.
When I actually went to get my certification in hypnosis, I think it was like day 3 or day 4, my, our instructor was trying to demonstrate how to use hypnosis to alleviate pain, and, of course, I volunteered. I'm like, "Yes, yes, yes, I wanna see this. I wanna go up there and be the
Yeah.
the volunteer." And my neck had been bothering me for, like, the whole duration that we were in the course.
Mhm.
Now, I'm a large-chested girl. I've had neck pain since that began in my teens, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always just learned to deal with it because you know what? I got big boobs. I'm gonna have neck pains. It just comes with
Yeah.
it. So when I got the opportunity to go up to volunteer, of course, that's the first thing that comes to my head. Like, oh, great, he's gonna help me with my neck pain. And
Mhm.
it sure enough did. It did. It alleviated my back. Like when he did his little hypnosis thing for the demonstration, my neck stopped bothering me and it was great. And I go sit back down and something occurred to me after my neck pain was alleviated. The whole time I'd been sitting at my desk, I was twitching my foot underneath the desk. I was doing the little tap, 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 or shaking it. And I realized I didn't feel the need to do that anymore after my pain in my neck
Mm.
had been alleviated. I was like, and it became so clear to me right then and there. That was something I was unconscious to, but that was something my habits had developed as a way of distracting me from the pain I was feeling in my neck.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, like,
That's
things
really
like that.
interesting.
Yeah, it was so cool, and then I realized there's so many just habits that we form, and so many people do stuff like that. They're not even fully aware of it, like, it's just something that they do, but there's usually a reason why you do that. It's to cope with something else. Now that's just
Huh.
one example, and that lends into just, like, the physical coping mechanisms that we often develop, but that
I
was
never really thought of like nail biting or twitching, like being fidgety. I never really thought of that as a coping mechanism until you said that. But I do see those things as like whenever you feel the need to be moving all the time, or because I naturally am kind of like a fidgety person, and um yoga is what like taught me how to be still because I was bringing so much awareness to my body. But before that, I mean, it's like a physical manifestation of my anxiety whenever I'm just twitching all the time, or people
Mhm.
biting their nails. I used to be a nail technician, and literally I would say, well, I did nails also right by a college, but even people who didn't go to the college, like I would say probably about 40% of people bite their nails.
Yeah. Oh, I
Like
wouldn't doubt if it's beyond that, you know,
crazy.
in, like, real world situations. What about those people that don't go to a nail salon, you know, because they get almost too embarrassed about it or something?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I got people of all walks of life in there, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's extremely common. Or biting their cuticles, or some people rip out their eyelashes.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then getting even deeper into coping mechanisms, there are also people who, we're in the kava community, and there are a lot of people who go to kava bars, which for those of you listening who are like, what the heck is kava? It's basically a drink made from the root of a pepper plant that makes you feel relaxed, but you don't really get inebriated from it. So
Mhm.
a lot of people who were formerly addicted to alcohol will find themselves at kava bars. And then there's also kratom, which is the cousin of coffee, and it kind of like tickles your opioid receptors and helps with pain. And so a lot of people who are previously addicted to opiates will find themselves at kava bars as well. So I've come into contact with several people who are previously addicted to pills or heroin or alcohol, and now they find themselves in kava bars drinking kava and kratom instead. And honestly, all of those things are coping mechanisms.
Mhm. They are.
But that
They are.
brings us into coping consciously. Honestly, I think taking that step, going from being addicted to pharmaceuticals to taking the step to move to something that's made from a plant that isn't like altering your reality,
Mhm.
um that to me is conscious coping. Like,
Yeah.
yes, some people still are using these plant medicines to numb, but in most cases, for someone to be able to find the strength within themselves to say these pills are not good for me and move into a community where they're drinking plant medicine instead, that's so beautiful to me.
Oh, I totally agree. I 100% agree with that because it does take a lot because the reason why these like okay, alcoholism or drug addiction, it becomes a problem when a person is doing that without trying to necessarily they're not concerned about what it's doing. They're not concerned about how it's affecting those around them. They're doing it because that's all they know what they can do to feel good themselves. When a person starts to think outside of that spectrum, they start to be more considerate of others and how their actions are affecting others. I think that's when they bring it into a different frame of reference or a different frame of mind or perspective. And then they're like, this is not good. It's not just, I'm not just doing this to myself. Now I'm starting to affect others. I have to be more mindful about what is going on. And so then they might start to search for other solutions. They might not know. Again, it's like if you are in that state of being, that is such this is what you end up knowing. That's all you know how to do. So that's how you know how to exist is by having this thing to help you exist. And so by taking that leap of like, okay, I'm going to try to exist in a new way. That is definitely a brave step for anybody to take to try to go forward and like, okay, I'm not going to do these. I'm not going to drink alcohol. I'm not going to take these pills anymore. I'm not going to do this. So what else can I go gravitate towards? And that is a beautiful show of growth for an individual to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this kind of takes us into becoming more aware of what we're even trying to cope with.
Hmm.
So a lot of the times it's something that's really deep down. And for some people, they don't want to do that work. And, you can't force the skin off the snake.
Right.
Like people grow at the rate that they're ready to grow. And sometimes inquisition about trying to figure out what's wrong can be draining. But I was just reading something a little while ago that was about just finding stillness, because so many times when we're worried about something, we try to think our way to the answer, right? We try to
Hmm.
think our way to it. But so often, really, all we need to do is find stillness and be quiet. And then that answer will just come to us. Because if you're, so for me with anxiety, it's like my mind would just go, go, go all the time, trying to put an opinion on everything, worrying about the outcome of everything, trying to control everything. So whenever I would start asking myself, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way? Then it just made me more anxious. But when I started doing a meditation practice and finding stillness within myself, then these little like tokens of wisdom would just come to me of like, you feel tension in your body because you still have resentment for your past. And I wasn't asking myself, why do I feel this way when that came up? I was just in stillness and it just came to me.
Right.
So, but there are going to be different things that work for everybody.
Right. Well, I think you're exactly right with finding stillness is finding presence, being present with yourself in the moment versus trying to I feel like when you're in that state of anxiety or if there's something uncomfortable that you're feeling, it usually is tied to thinking about the past, either past regrets or like thinking, how could I have done this differently? And looking at it in a negative light, like something was wrong with me. Why did I do it this way? Or if you're concerned about the future, how do you control or be in control of things to come, or what you're trying to plan and do? You're trying to either one way or the other, you're thinking about the past or the future rather than being in the moment. And that can
Yes.
cause you the anxiety, that can cause the discomfortable feelings, or the uncomfortable feelings. So to get to that state of allowing yourself to be totally present right now, here and now, you're not distracting yourself. That often I think comes up with why coping mechanisms do arise, because people are almost afraid to be present with themselves, or they just feel so uncomfortable. They are fearful. If I'm uncomfortable thinking about what was, how am I supposed to deal with what is? That's two different things though. And I think people need to take that leap of faith again and be brave to step into the moment, and you find that stillness, you find that presence, and you find out that, you know what, I was just worrying about the past, or I am just worrying about the future. If I'm here, if I'm now, things feel a lot better.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. Like, one thing I like to do whenever I find myself focusing on the past or the future is to bring myself into the present moment. I'll look around the room and be like, the walls are peach, the carpet is tan, and just say the color of things. And it brings me into really focusing and just being right now, here.
That's a good that I love that. That is a very good
Thanks.
method. And like being an artist myself, and you're an artist too, so you
Yeah.
get this. When you kind of find yourself looking at a piece of art, or you can find yourself looking at an image or a picture of whatever, or even just going outside for a moment and looking at a tree, and you start analyzing the details that are within an image, that is bringing your consciousness back into the present moment and focusing right here and right now. I think that's another good tool people can bring to the front. If they have like a picture that they like and they have it hanging on their wall, focus on that. Don't try to look at or think about, like, what if I move things? What if I do this differently in my house? Like find something in the moment. And so the colors on the wall, that's beautiful. That's so simple. But
It is, and you can do it anywhere. Like, if
yeah,
you're working, you can do it, like,
yeah,
literally anywhere.
yeah. Like I think the other day I was trying to my boyfriend was interviewing for a potential uh raise, or not a raise, like a promotion, and I was trying to listen in, and what I was doing, so I wouldn't just like find myself running in my brain like, what's going to happen, is he going to get it? I was like trying to listen in on, because he was doing it online, and I was trying to listen in while he was in the other room, and found myself staring at a painting I had on my hallway wall, and I was like looking at the details, and you know what, that brought me into the moment so I could focus on what I was trying to hear from him in that moment, rather than
You
again
can do
worrying
better
so
at
much.
eavesdropping.
Yeah, it's my business too, you know?
Oh my god, that's funny.
Oh.
So, let's chat a little bit about how people can consciously cope. Like, what are some ways that people can Okay, so ultimately, like, I didn't even finish that question. What are some ways that people can cope in a healthy way? Like, to me, whenever I think of a coping mechanism, I think of like a distraction,
Right.
right? So like
Mhm.
um and a lot of times we hear distraction like a bad thing, but the distraction doesn't have to be from the actual problem itself. It can just be from the the mental chatter that comes with the problem.
Yeah.
Does that
And you
make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be very common. I mean, I think when someone might be I think a typical reference for coping mechanism does go to a negative place. Like, okay, thinking someone who is an alcoholic or dependent on drugs, that is a negative coping mechanism that they take upon themselves, or reference, I mean. And it doesn't have to be that way. you can have other coping mechanisms, like I mentioned in the beginning, cleaning, or someone might just be toe tapping, or something that's not necessarily a negative or self destructive type of habit. I think
Yeah,
it
but
if
I feel like when you're talking about those, it's still like rather than negative and positive, maybe it's like conscious and
Right,
unconscious.
right, right. Yeah. No, that's what I was going to get into the next part. It all comes about with your level of consciousness connecting those habits with, like,
Yes.
being aware of why you do what you do. You like so many people I think get into the habit of just going about life, and they might not be asking themselves um deeper questions. And I mean, that's okay. I know we all have different purposes for coming into this life. We're meant to learn what we're going to learn in our existence. There's no right or wrong way of living or existing. But when you choose to become more self-aware, at that point you gain more control over what you decide to do, or what are you doing just habitually that is just formed or developed just you going about things. And
Right.
so I think I'm the healthy way of handling any coping mechanism is just to bring more awareness to it. Like, start analyzing yourself, like almost bring your perspective out of your own body for a second. If you can do that, just picture yourself like looking at yourself like, okay, here I am. Okay, I am toe tapping. Why am I toe tapping? Why am I not just being still? And not asking it in a like, what's wrong with me? Why am I doing that? But like genuinely trying to figure out the inner workings of yourself. Like, okay, that might be coming from what else am I, and I think meditation would be a great tool at that point to kind of get outside of your own head for a second, to really just analyze yourself and being present into understanding your inner workings.
See, to me, meditation isn't self analysis, it's self acceptance. So, like how we were talking about with pain, how, like, whenever you feel pain, you accept it, and that's what allows it to pass. Whenever we notice these things about ourselves, okay, I'm tapping my foot, then rather than saying, why am I tapping my foot? I can just stop tapping my foot, you know?
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
With
But,
me,
like,
like, well, back to my little story, like, I was tapping my foot at my hypnosis thing, and I could, like, I would feel it like, "Oh, gosh, why am I okay," and I would stop for a second, but then it just continued again, and it wasn't until I realized it was connected to the pain that I was able to, like, "Oh," and
so when that happened, do you know if you asked yourself, like, why am I tapping my foot? Or did your neck
no.
pain go away and then you realized you stopped tapping your foot?
Well, yeah, well, my neck pain went away and I stopped tapping my foot, but I realized I didn't feel the need to tap my foot. And
Yeah.
previously, it's like anytime I tapped my foot, it felt like it was a need.
Okay. Yeah. For me personally, I find that when I'm asking myself, like, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? It's coming from a place of, because think about it. Like when you're a little kid, you don't do that, right? You just do whatever you want to do,
Mhm.
right? But to me, that voice of, well, why'd you do that way comes from this, like, and this is just for me personally, obviously, but like to me, I noticed that it came from like a parental place of like my parent not understanding why I was doing what I was doing. So it was
Mhm.
almost like kind of having to prove why I wanted to do what I was doing. So that kind of makes me think about hula hooping.
Oh.
So random. But like with hula hooping, like, I just came upon it at a festival and I think it's fun and I love doing it. But then I got to a point where I was asking myself, like, why do I spend so much time hula hooping? And it created this, like, this, it made me realize that I wasn't doing something productive, I guess. Like, there's this message that's so instilled in us in society that like, oh, like if you're doing something, it has to be productive or you have to be able to make money from it. But like, I just like hula hooping because it's fun. And I guess to me, when I was asking myself that, like, why am I hula hooping? To have fun wasn't like a justifiable answer to myself. And so I stopped doing it. And then for like years, I wasn't hula hooping. And then I recently made friends with some people who hoop dance and just started doing it again. And I was like, you know what? I don't like it's fun and I enjoy doing it is enough of a reason. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's good to come to that awareness. And then I'm realizing as we're discussing this, I feel like there's a different place of when we ask the question why we do this. I
totally.
feel like
Absolutely.
the frame
Like
of
the
that
intention
question.
behind it.
Yeah. Like when I am in my head of asking why I do something, it's to bring about more awareness. The question of why to me is not in a sense of like I need to change this. So why am I doing that? Like it's like it's a bad thing. No. Why as to understand myself in a way to accept it. It can
Okay.
definitely be a question that people can ask themselves, why am I doing that? What's wrong with me? Because there's like another piece to that question. It's not just asking why. It's like questioning it and doubting, adding that intent behind it. And I don't
Yeah,
think like, it definitely can be that way for, many people, and I used to do that too. I mean, I think we all in our stages of development go through that where we're questioning, like, "Why am I the way I am?" And, like, not in a state of acceptance. But if you can get to that point of you just realizing, "You know what? Existing. There's nothing wrong with just existing. There's nothing wrong
totally.
with just doing as you do. You are living your life as you are. There's nothing wrong with that. When you get to that point of acceptance in that level, then you can start asking in a way to expand your awareness as to, okay, so now that I accept myself, why do I do this?
Right, right. Beautiful. Like the intention behind the why is what matters. Okay.
Mhm.
Dude, I love having these conversations with you. I feel like we gain so much perspective about like shit that we talk about all the time, but it's like we are like opposite sides of the same coin sometimes.
It's
But
for growth.
yes, yes. But like, yeah, no, that makes so much sense. So like asking yourself why you do things from a place of love rather than from a place of doubt.
Mhm.
Ooh, yes.
Yes.
um,
It's juicy, right?
yes, juicy. Oh my god. I feel like our first merch for this podcast has to say juicy on it.
Oh my god, I
That was
love
a
it.
juicy episode. um Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
But that kind of makes me think about when I found myself in bars a lot.
Mhm,
And then I started, like sometimes it's fun to go to the bar. Sometimes you have like something to celebrate.
mhm.
But, if that's like an every night thing or a 4 times a week thing,
It starts being a habit.
then you might
Mm,
have a little coping mechanism on your hands.
mhm. Yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and I started to ask myself like or I guess I just started more so feeling like this isn't in alignment. Like that was the intuitive hit I was getting about it. This isn't in alignment. This doesn't
Right.
feel good. Like for me, whenever I'm making decisions or trying to align with my intuition, I focus on how things feel in my body. So I'll ask like, do I want to go out and drink tonight and see how that feels in my body? And honestly, even just now when I said that, my stomach did like a little flip, like, "Ugh, no."
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And then I'll say like, do I want to go to the beach today? And then I feel like good about it. So
Right.
it doesn't have to be this like whenever you ask yourself why, you like don't overcomplicate it. Just ask yourself, you know, like do I want to do this?
Or am I
You
making myself do this to deal with something else? Or
Yes.
yeah.
And so that kind of gets us into like digging into the issues themselves. So maybe let's talk about like how people get wrapped up in their past because I think that's a big one.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how can we heal our perception of the past?
Oh, there's so many techniques I feel that or tools that are out there that people can do. And I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when a lot of people have issues with reflecting backwards, I feel like there might be resistance to wanting to look back at the past because they consciously do know that a lot of pain has existed in their past, or they might have experienced trauma or various things like that. But when you are able to get to a place of taking that step in wanting to reflect backwards to in order to almost acknowledge where you are now, that allows you to like look back and heal the old you. And again, like so I reference hypnosis all the time because that's my specialty. The whole reason why I fell in love with hypnosis is because it did allow for this safe space for me to go back and look at my issues or things that have happened to me in my past in a way of like, oh, you know what? I'm not that person anymore. I'm a different person now. And so now I can reflect backwards. I can look at what has happened in my past and bring my current knowledge now to the past as if I'm time traveling. And when I'm able to do that, I'm bringing that energy of where I am now back to this space where it wasn't that way before. And it's almost like I'm manipulating space and time in a beautiful way to bring about this healing and peace. And so for me, it helped a lot. And I feel I got so passionate about hypnosis because I felt like that is a tool that so many people aren't aware of that they can do for themselves.
Totally. I can vouch for that, honestly, because whenever I did a past life regression with you, there was a time where I was feeling a lot of pain in my past life, and you led me to visualize myself now talking to myself then.
Mm-hmm.
And it did bring a lot of healing.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I like to do to heal my perception of the past is to rewrite old stories.
Beautiful.
So yeah, like this really helped me a lot when I was going through some life changes when I was living in Orlando. I had made friends with this group of people who they just didn't care about who I was. I was kind of just like an accessory to their clique. And I think I was talking about this a little bit in the last episode. It was like I was just like this creative, quirky girl that was in their group, but they didn't really care about me. They just wanted to get turned all the time.
Yep.
And so whenever I wrote that story down and I wrote down all the pain that I felt from the situation and the way that it ended and the judgment and the hurt that I felt from those people. And then I wrote down all the lessons that I learned from that. I was like, holy shit, I'm so glad that this happened the way that it happened because no matter what has happened to you, there are some terrible things that happen to people, but no matter what has happened to you, that situation does not have power over you if you don't give that situation power over you. If you decide that you are the main character in your story and you are the hero of your story and you're ready to be a hero instead of a victim, you have the power to look at those past situations and say, you know what? I'm a fucking phoenix, dude. I rose from the ashes and I'm like, fucking the main character of my story and I'm going to make it a good story. Like, man, I just feel like I got super Tony Robbins on that. But like
No, but you
I
were
was
so
like channeling
true.
him.
You were so true. You're absolutely right on that, though, and I think that goes into the headspace of learning how to take your past when you've almost, like, people so often look backwards and regret what has been. But when you take that and change that, where you're no longer regretting what has happened, but you're accepting what has happened and realizing through that acceptance, you can love that. You can take it and value
Yes.
it now versus like not finding value in it. That changes just the energy about the situation. It doesn't change what has been, but
No.
allows you to take back control, like because it has happened to you.
Yes. It gives you the power to find peace with yourself. And like all versions of you deserve your love.
Oh yeah.
Every single version of you that you've ever been deserves your love.
Mhm.
No matter how embarrassed or ashamed you are of a time in your life, that's that was you. And without that version of you, then you wouldn't be who you are right now. So I like to go back at different versions of myself and visualize myself then and say, I love you and I accept you. And it's like this piece of my heart comes back to me because whenever we feel shame and guilt and embarrassment for our past, it's like we're denying a part of us. Like, yeah, that may be a past part of us, but it still was
Right.
there.
Right. Oh yeah. That was beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so well then let's talk about how someone might be able to find peace with their ideas of thinking about the future. Let's go into the future sense now. What are some ideas you
Hmm.
have on that?
For me, I find that the future and the way that we think about the future is 100% connected to the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs that we carry. So, for a lot of people, it's it's extremely common to meet people in our society, at least in the United States, who are like, "Yeah, I'm going to be rich one day." Right?
But
Like,
yeah.
how many people do you meet who say that shit, right?
I
Like,
remember
"Oh,
telling
one
myself
day."
that one day.
What?
Oh, I remember telling that to myself, like, as a kid. Like, "One day I'm gonna grow
Yeah.
up and be a famous person, I'm gonna make all this
Yeah,
money."
right? Because these stories are ingrained into us. And, like,
Mhm.
I am gonna be rich one day. But but, like, I have taken a step back from that belief and looked at it and said, is that really something that I want? Or is that something that society told me that I wanted? And for a lot of
Mm.
people, it is just something that society told them that they wanted. Like, honestly, I'd be cool with like 500,000 a year. You know, that's like a comfortable life.
That's good.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's good. Like $500,000 a year, like I can live comfortable and I can give so much to the community. I can give so
Mhm.
much to the world with that, you know? And but
Mhm.
I've done that work. I've taken a step back and said, why do I want that? Do I want that because someone on the TV was like, someone was having like my super sweet 16 and had all this like bougie shit and I want that bougie shit? Or am I saying that because I legitimately want to have that level of abundance so that I can give and so that I can live a really comfortable and fucking awesome like life of travel and luxury? Like,
Mhm.
what do I why do I want that? You
Right.
know? Um, so, but then, a lot of the times people who have that belief, I want to be rich one day, well, then they also have the belief that it's really hard to make money and I have to
Mhm.
work my ass off to make money. So like that doesn't even align. Like you literally have like, dude, I feel like I'm like giving myself advice right now. Like, wow.
It's like your
Um,
higher self is channeling you right now, and it's like
yeah.
speaking through you.
Seriously,
Mhm.
that's literally exactly what's happening. So it's like whenever we have these polarities within us of, well, I want to be rich one day, but money is really hard to make, then why do I think that? Why do I think money is hard to make? Well, maybe from the time I was a kid, I heard money doesn't grow on trees or you got to work hard for what you want in this world. And like,
Mhm.
so I guess coming back to the point, finding peace with the future, it really comes down to what are the stories you're telling yourself? And are they even yours? And if they're not yours, do you want to keep them?
Right. Right. I think that's it. And you know what? You reminded me of some stuff. Because like for me personally growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. Like when my mom did the single mom thing, she had my two elder siblings and then my dad wasn't in the picture. So growing up, doing the single mom of three kids up until I was about 6 years old, money's tight. But by the time she married my stepdad, we kind of moved out to the country in Georgia, and we had my stepdad started teaching us all these like self-sufficient type of things. And even though we didn't have a lot of money, I in the at that time as a kid, I'm kind of resentful because I don't have all these toys I want. I don't have all these other things that I just want because that's just what I see on TV. That's what I want. And
Mm-hmm.
but now as I got older, and especially when I had my son and when I left his father and I was doing the single mom thing in the beginning, I finally learned how to appreciate what I'd gone through. Like, you know what? I didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but it set me up to be prepared for moments like this. And then I was able to picture, okay, so like picturing where I was in the present moment if I didn't have everything I thought I wanted. Especially when you have a young child, you're automatically prone to trying to think of what do you have to do next to be able to provide for your child.
Yeah.
And even if I was like in a very low spot, like I did not have enough of my income wasn't what I wanted it to be able to afford all the things I wish I could provide for my kid. But then I would picture something. I would imagine, okay, so like where I am right now, if this doesn't change, is that the worst? If this is just what it is, how do I learn to accept things as they are? And also, I would imagine what's the worst possible thing that this could change into? And is it actually the worst thing? Like, I would picture myself the worst possible thing would be living under a bridge, right? Not having a home. But then I thought back, like, wait a minute, growing up in the country, I know how to I know how to fish. I know how to hunt if I had to. I know how to forage. I know how to make a little fort out of nothing, out of sticks. I'm like going back to my childhood. I'm like, wait a minute. These things that I used to resent can prepare me for things to come if things got really bad. And you know what? The worst isn't the worst, really. And just doing that mental game of picturing things changing, like future sense, like allowed me to be more present, allowed me to accept more of what I currently have versus what I don't have. And I think,
That's beautiful.
oh, thanks. I think a lot of people might be doing that when they're imagining the future, that like, what do I not have? And thinking, oh, if I don't have that, what does that mean about myself?
Yes. Coming from a place of lack rather than coming from a place of abundance.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you literally did the work of shifting into that's called an abundance mindset whenever you go from like thinking about what you don't have into thinking about what you do have. That's an abundance mindset.
Hmm.
So whenever you're talking about your past and your childhood and how you thought about all of this lack, but then you realize those were all lessons, you literally were like reframing your past into a mindset of abundance so that you could see abundance in your future. So
Hmm.
that's really interesting. And I think a lot of people, whenever they think, oh, well, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this, I want to get this, this, and this, then bam, you're back in that. You're back in that cycle of lack. But then they think, well, if I don't focus on that, how am I going to get it? Well, the universe works on abundance. It's like the feelings that you feel based on the law of attraction, which to me is very real, and a lot of the greats of our human history have vouched for that. But the feelings you feel create more of the feelings you feel,
Hmm.
right? So whenever we feel abundance, then more abundance is created. And that's not to say that you don't have to work for whatever it is you want. But when you're working and you're feeling good about it rather than thinking about what you don't have, then you're setting yourself up to draw those things into your path.
Right. Excuse me. And I think another thing, people that are struggling with finding themselves in that mindset of abundance, maybe they don't need to necessarily think of it like of abundance. Find that acceptance. Because when we are finding yourself in that state of acceptance, that in turn creates the abundance. And I think people might have a disconnection with that, or they might not be associating that together. But I think you get abundance. You get exactly what you need and what you want when you find yourself in a state of acceptance. Because what is acceptance? Acceptance is love. You find yourself in the state of love, and then the universe will provide for you everything you need or want. Uh,
That I get what you're saying with the acceptance. It's like I think of a path, right? Whenever this is my analogy for acceptance. So I think of a path and I think of little stepping stones on the path, right?
mhm.
But it's like a magical path. This is like a visualization that I've never had to try to describe before. um but when I started realizing about kind of just being at peace with where you are, I just visualized this path, and it was like I was standing on a stepping stone. And when I fully accept and embraced that stepping stone for exactly what it was and said, you know what? I'm good on the stepping stone. I'm grounded. Then the next stepping stone in the path would appear.
I love that. I love that
Thanks.
visualization. Yes.
And then with abundance, a lot of people think of abundance as like an abundance of money. That's like usually what people's minds go to first. But there is always abundance around us all the time. We just have to look for it, right? We just have to kind of change our perception about what abundance is, and then it's just drawn to us. So, like, if you're outside, look at a tree. There's an abundance of leaves on the tree. Look at the grass. There's an abundance of blades of grass. Look at the beach. There's an abundance of grains of sand. Nature is a beautiful example of abundance.
Mhm.
So whenever we can look at those things and say, the world is so abundant, then we can start to change our perception from that scarcity mindset and that focus on lack and shift it into the world has so much of everything, and I am magnetizing what I need.
Mhm. I like that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and yeah, that goes with people finding presence in the moment. It all kind of comes full circle, I think. Like
It does.
just being present, being here, being right now gives you everything you need and
Yes.
allows you to not worry about what was or what's going to be or not having enough. You just find your presence and then everything falls into place. The next stepping stone, as you said, comes just appears. And I love that. Yeah, I feel like the older I get, I like bring that into my own life and I'm finding the results happen more and more just like that. It's like the puzzle pieces all aligning and forming the bigger picture.
Yes.
Oh,
So beautiful. Because
yeah.
really, whenever we are fully in the present moment, when our mind is here and our body is here and our breath is here, then we see, okay, well, the future hasn't happened yet and the past is gone and I'm here now and I'm living and I'm breathing and my heart is beating, pumping blood through my veins. Like,
Mhm.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, this episode was indeed juicy.
Juicy, juicy.
That makes me think of that 70s show whenever Eric says to Donna, my juicy.
That's good.
Oh my goodness. All right, guys. Oh, do you want to do it?
I was gonna just say, like, we done, or do we want to ask anything else on the topic of coping mechanism, or say something else? Because I feel like we covered a whole bunch. I think this is good.
Yeah, it was good. I guess I would say when it comes to coping and it comes to finding those tools to get through whatever it is you're going through, There are so many different things that will feed your soul instead of draining it. And you don't have to be good at those things, and nobody has to see the art that you make or the dance that you do or the song that you sing. It can just be for you.
That's right. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening today, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, please pop over to the iTunes store or Apple Podcast and write us a review. We would love that so much. And if you would like to continue the discussion, you can find us over in the Vivid Vibes Tribe on Facebook. Thank you so much, guys. Namaste.
Namaste.